So, we are here to demonstrate truth. We are here to activate greatness, no? I titled this talk a few weeks ago, and they used to say in ministerial school, when I was in ministerial school, that there is something that happens when you title a talk or launch an idea. And when I was at Reverend Jean Marie's ordination just last Thursday, I thought to myself, as the minister was presenting tips and tools and advice, I thought to myself that I would like to give one little tool, tip, or piece of advice to our beloved Reverend Jean Marie. Would you come up and receive your blessing? We love you. She already has the part on seizing the day, being where you are, and making yourself irreplaceable. She already has that part down. So here's the part. The part is that sometimes when you launch a talk, and I always like to say to my classmates, I don't know if I believe that, and I'm not going to live that one. But they would say, when you launch a talk, when you launch a title, get ready, because you're going to live it. You're going to live it for the next little while. So guess what I picked for this sermon topic? Resentment. Resentment. Like the idea of resentment is really resending an injury, resending a negative thought, resending an experience over and over and over until it becomes a cycle and a part of your being, right? Until you have an identity with it and it becomes an experience. So I have had the beauty and the glory, and this is part of the tip, the beauty and the glory to become so present to in the last couple of weeks, this principle, this idea of the human condition interacting with the concept of resentment. So, my dear, when these things come up and when these things happen, let us not be afraid and let us not twist ourselves away from them and say, that's not about me, and let us invite everything into our experience. And just like the sacred scripture says, let us not ask, what did I do? What is this? What is that? What is this? Why? But let us know that everything is for the glory of God. Everything is for the glory of the great good, the glory of the great source, and that source that wants to flow so freely and unhindered through us, but that in our human condition, in our human experience, we find that there are snags and barbed wires within our consciousness that hold back or that cut that free-flowing, ever-present, absolute, perfect love and energy field of consciousness and flow. So, the temptation can be to say, when things come up in our experience, this isn't about me, this is about someone else. This isn't about my spiritual growth, this is about that. The human condition can also be tempted to go along in these ideas of building up evidence, building up a case for anything and everything that disturbs its peace. Anything and everything that disturbs its peace. But what is a core practice in the unity tradition? A core practice is to go within, no? To go within and to say, if there is somehow something slowing the flow of good in my life, how can I dive into my internal landscape and be present to what might be there for me to heal and reveal? Because there are no problems in the mind of God. There are no problems in divine mind. And when we step into a place where we start to think that anything is anything other than a path to revealing the evolution of our consciousness, the evolution of experiencing the true potential of our being, the core of ourselves, we're asleep to the real practice. So what do you think? Do you think that there were more experiences this last week, 2 weeks, in my life that would birth this concept of resentment? Do you think that more television programs, movies, more situations and circumstances in the people that I speak to, more situations and circumstances in my own life occurred in these last 2 weeks so that I could write this experience? Maybe. It's a possibility, and it's an interesting possibility, isn't it? Thinking like, I live in a vortex. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this, so I drew to me everything about this. There's another idea to try on. Another idea to try on is this, that I have opened up my mind and my heart and my being to be so keenly aware of the circulation of flow when it has to do with this idea of resentment, that I am now noticing a myriad of things, subtle and unsubtle, that I may not have otherwise been aware of, that I may have just otherwise walked through my life and walked through the experience of the past 2 weeks in a state of being sedated to it, in a state of being asleep, in a state of having these things happen, go on right in front of me, go on in my experiences, go on the media in the world around me. But I wasn't paying attention. So then if I wasn't paying attention, does that mean these things don't become experiences in my reality? Does that mean they're not building in my experience? We are launchers. As human beings, we launch our thoughts into the field of dimension, and simultaneously, we launch them within our bodies as cellular and emotional memory. Much of this is done consciously. Much of this is done unconsciously. I don't think that because I don't see them, those things aren't happening. Mark Twain said, I like to think that the moon is there even if I'm not looking at it. I like to think that the moon is there even if I'm not looking at it. But our spiritual practice, our spiritual journey and being awake to it, coming together in consciousness every week to reflect, gives us an opportunity to look at the moons, to look at that which is in our field of consciousness that at other points we may be too busy in our day-to-day existence to pause and look at. When we don't pause and look at our experiences, they become defining factors in who we are and how we relate to our world. What we react to and react from reflects the creation of patterns. Those patterns become identities. Those thoughts, beliefs, and emotions turn into an experience of being. Think about something today. Allow something to come to mind, either in the world or in your own life, that you could be tempted to have resentment about. You got it? If you don't have it and you can't think of it in yourself, think globally. You'll be there pretty quickly. Is there anything that has happened in your life that you could feel resentment about, that when you look back at it, when you think about it, that there's not peace or compassion or love, but there's actually an energy there, a suffering, a hurt, someone did something wrong, maybe some evidence, maybe a story, maybe you've got a whole People magazine cover on it, and it's on your coffee table, and when you get home, you pick it up. Think about what that is. When we have a resentment, we are experiencing something as we first experiencing it, but then sending it into motion again in our bodies and in the field around us. And as we send it into motion again, it builds up energy. It builds up steam. You know that little story, and I love and hate telling that story, but imagine if I had a wheelbarrow there and I almost brought it for you. And I have compost or dirt, whatever, and I'm digging it, and I'm making a pile. And every time I have an experience, no matter if it's in a different realm, if it's from a different person, it comes in a different form, if it is that same archetype experience that leads me to a feeling of resentment, I'm taking a shovel and I'm picking up that dirt and I'm putting it over here, building a pile of resentment until I'm standing in the dirt, until there's dirt all around. And then there's that little story of the Christ child, the awakened child, the enlightened child that does not look at the dirt, but instead goes, there must be a pony in here. There must be a pony in here somewhere. And that story is really much funnier when you say it's not dirt. Our jobs is to look past all of the dirt and find the pony. Because if we go with the mind that simply experiences and reacts, we go with what Charles Fillmore called the mortal mind. And then we begin to crystallize that mind. And when that mind is crystallized, it becomes our reality. It becomes our experience. And there's nothing outside of us that could break us from that trance, from that experience. There's only that which is within us. Only a deep spiritual practice, a tethering of the mind, can wake us up from this slumber. Charles Fillmore calls the mortal mind, he calls it error consciousness in man. Man composed of ungodlike thoughts. It is the opposite of the Christ mind, which is the perfect mind of God in man. Mortal mind gathers its information through the senses. It judges by appearances, which are often false judgments. Man may renounce this false state of mind if he is to be one with God. He must renounce it. Mortal mind breeds sin, poverty, sickness, and death. He goes on to say that a fixed state of mind is a combination of thoughts in consciousness that are hard to change, ideas that have been crystallized. So how long do we want to stay in ideas that are crystallized, or do we simply want to know and have our attention drawn to any experiences we have that are unlike the whole, that are unlike harmony, that are unlike love, and say, somewhere within my vibratory field, there is a thought being launched. And the stronger my emotional experience, the more times that paradigm, that injury, that experience has been launched. And when we don't even notice that a rocket has been launched of thought, it probably goes off frequently, very frequently. Charles Fillmore talks about thought, and he says, thought, a product of thinking, a mental vibration or impulse. Each thought is an identity that has a central ego around which all its elements revolve. Thoughts are capable of expressing themselves. Every thought clothes itself in a life form according to the character given it by the thinker. Pretty intense. These thought forms that have a central ego, that are given life by the thinker, that is us as the launchers. So what's the spiritual awakening process? Well, in the Gospel of Thomas, this is one of my favorite passages. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says, Jesus said, those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel and they will rule over all. But isn't it interesting? It says, when they find, they will be disturbed. What kind of a great find is that? I mean, really, if we're looking at finding truth principles and some spiritual awakening, and the scriptures tell us, the master teacher, the radical rabbi says, oh, come on, look at this. You're going to find. And when you find, guess what? You will be disturbed. You will be appalled. You will be disgusted. You will be, you will be disturbed. In the book Celebrate Yourself by Eric Butterworth, he says, truth should disturb you, challenge you deeply. It should ignite sparks within you, set fires under you, stir up your enthusiasm. So if before we marvel, we are disturbed, what are we disturbed looking at? Because the master teachers, the saints, and the sages throughout the ages don't tell us to keep looking outside of ourselves, do they? They always point to within. Which means that disturbance that we become aware of will be a disturbance in the field of thought or mind or consciousness. That is disturbing, is it not? It is very disturbing the moment we wake up and realize, I can do something about this, and I wasn't. I can do something about this, but I was asleep. That in fact, the power to do something about this lies within me. There is a fine line between becoming these experiences, identifying with them, and experiencing them. And that's the point where we begin to marvel. We begin to marvel when we recognize that these things can flow in and out of my consciousness, that which is happening outside of me is also something happening within me, and I can begin to observe it, and from observing it, I become free. I become free to see something entirely different, and I have to, in order to really engage that process, I have to let go of everything I think I thought. I have to let go of all the building up of evidence. You know, in my week, I marveled. I marveled at watching myself analyze the patterns and go, this is out there, that, and then going, wow, look at how I do this, there, that. Very interesting. And what happens when we have that experience with ourselves, when we fully surrender to the spiritual process? What happens? Nothing less than dropping our judgments, dropping our fears, and taking up compassion. Taking up compassion. Because there is no room for anything but love and acceptance of the moment, of the experience, of the self, of other. When we're in that state, there's nothing better, nothing more enlightening than recognizing that you see things in a moment entirely different and everything is shifted, and that in fact, you just bask in the moment of silence and the moment of awareness, knowing that this thing I'm disturbed by is not something I can hammer at, fix, saw, cut up, change necessarily, but I have had a moment of awakening. And in a moment of awakening, there is transformation, and I can trust that process. We can trust that process. We've seen recently in the news, there's, the shootings, more shootings, right? So one of the latest shootings, the Santa Barbara shooting, I saw a piece in the news where one of the fathers whose son died, gave a response, and it says that he said this: I have been told that the shooter's father, this is the guy whose son died, one of the guys whose son died. I've been told that the shooter's father has said he wanted to devote his life to making sure that doesn't happen again. I share that with him, Martinez said. He's a father, I'm a father. He loved his son, I love my son. His son died, my son died. Period. The world is awake to compassion. Compassion, releasing resentment, and embracing our true nature, which is absolute love and compassion, heals the world, heals the psyche, heals the self. It has arrived. The time is now. We just celebrated not only the ordination and graduation of our beloved ministers here, but we also celebrated the honorary degree given to Dr. Maya Angelou from Unity. She was to be awarded this honorary doctorate. She was to be awarded this at an event that was going to happen this week in Kansas City. And we know she's in her freedom form, and she made her transition. So she was honored at the Unity ceremony instead here. And she is forever in the graduation packet of knowing that Unity has honored her love for Unity in this way. And our representatives, Reverend Lynn, and others from Unity are going to go out to her memorial. They have been invited to offer her this degree at her funeral, at her celebration of life service. I bring her up not just because she was such a powerful Unity woman, Unity teacher. I bring her up because she is a woman that embodied these principles and this truth. She was raped at a young age and then did not want to speak about it, and in fear of speaking about it and something happening to this person, she did share finally, and the rapist was murdered. And she stopped speaking for years. She stopped speaking, and she went into her internal landscape and created a world in there, fell in love with poetry, fell in love with her creative self, and then had to, be nurtured and drawn back out, had to have the courage to come back out into the world and create a life. She is a woman that didn't get more than a high school education formally, but had over 30 degrees bestowed upon her. She is a woman who chose to overcome, who chose to prove and to demonstrate principles that there is not one thing that could happen to someone that could not be absolutely used for the transformation of life, for the glory of the source. She said, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." So I invite each one of us, as we go about this week, this month, to engage in that process of looking at life and starting to shift things around. When we're in those moments of tears, those moments, can we bring forth a moment of humility, a moment of laughter? Can we press through so deeply that we get to the other side of all these experiences and not become defined by our experiences, but in fact become defined by the light of overcoming the light of life that is within us? Yes, we can. Namaste.